All right, welcome to today's career chat. Whoops, let me go back one. We are welcoming Christopher Spaller from Mercy Health, St. Mary's here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And Christopher, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
We're so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
We are going to have a wonderful conversation for the next 30 minutes to help young people learn about the field of radiology and
Perfect.
some of the jobs behind the scenes that they may have never heard about that might end up being a really good fit for them. So welcome, welcome.
All righty.
So to get us started, Chris, I'd like to take you back to when you were 15 or 16. Is this where you thought you'd land? What were you thinking back in high school, and how did that kind of evolve for you?
Yeah, definitely did. I wasn't quite sure as far as radiology specifically. Truth be told, as all, I guess, young students want to be, I was going to be a professional baseball player. That's what I was going to do. And then when I was cut from the high school team, I realized, well, that's not going to happen. So let's think about what this could look like. Was always interested in sciences, so anatomy, chemistry, biology, and naturally I just kind of thought, well, maybe healthcare is the way to go. Didn't have any of my family members that really worked in healthcare, so it was just kind of taking a shot in the dark on that. And when I declared my major, I hadn't declared a major when I enrolled at Ferris State University, so I knew healthcare, but wasn't sure specifically what it was going to be, and kind of landed in radiology.
That's great. So when you got started right out of high school, what was that first step? Did you go to a community college, a four-year degree? How did you even know what to do? Where'd you get that information to even find out what to do?
So I talked with, I have older cousins and friends that were kind of floating around. A couple of them went to community college, others that went to the four-year university. Like hindsight looking back on it, I probably should have done community college first, but I didn't. I kind of wanted to get away. I'm from the east side of the state, so I thought Ferris State University, Big Rapids, sure, let's try that. So it was a nice learning experience for me. And I had friends that went to community college route and then enrolled into the four-year degree after the fact. So either one I think is okay. I chose the university route, but I think anything is acceptable. So, and it definitely, your initial classes were all kind of the same. So in my first year, I was taking the basics, math, reading, or like a science class, just the things that you need to take no matter where you go.
Yeah, so let's let them learn from your wisdom, because you said if you did it all over again, you might consider community college, and tell them why. Why should they at least consider that seriously?
So I mean, truth be told, like you're getting the same base education, if you will, that is important across the board. And truly, like, I paid more per credit hour. It was expensive to, go to Ferris and pay a higher credit hour amount than had I just gone to a community college. Just the cost of living, all those pieces that I'm paying for now still, which is okay because I love my job and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my education, but definitely would have looked at that, I think, a little bit differently. In my high school, there was kind of a stereotype about we had a community college just down the road that they called it Hall Road High. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. But again, hindsight 2020, I probably wish I would have done that at least for the first year, get the basics out of the way, get my feet wet with college, and then go to a university.
Yeah, my daughter, she ended up going to community college those first 2 years, and she saved $20,000 by doing that. So yeah, I do want young people to really
absolutely
be intelligent about that. So you got a four-year degree? Is that what you got from Ferris in the end?
Correct. So I actually went to Ferris for 5 years, including my internship. And as I mentioned earlier, I hadn't declared a major. So I was in a medical terminology class, kind of thinking allied health sciences. And one of the professors was like, you're kind of smart. And I'm like, oh, thanks. She's like, have you ever thought about nuke med? And I'm like, no, I don't even know what that is. So I kind of looked into it and declared that as my major. So it was an accelerated bachelor's program, but you had to wait kind of a year to get in. So I finished that in 4 years. And then also got a bachelor's in healthcare administration. So I actually have 2 bachelor's degrees, and it took me 5 years. That includes 2 internships, actually. So,
well, that's fantastic. You did get a lot of bang for your buck, at least in those 5 years.
Yeah, that's true. I did. That's true.
Yeah. So for young people on the Zoom call today that may not know what nuclear medicine is, tell us about that too, as we start to compare and contrast what radiology is versus med tech.
Absolutely. So nuclear medicine is a subspecialty of radiology, in which case you're using a radiopharmaceutical. So we're injecting it in the patient, or they're taking it by mouth, and we're looking at how their organs are working. So CAT scan, X-ray, you're kind of looking at, okay, what does this look like? You're getting different views of it. X-ray is 2 view, CT can be 3D. You're kind of getting a better picture of what that looks like. But nuke med, you're looking at how is the heart working? What is the ejection fraction, which is like how, what percentage of the heart is pumping? How are your lungs working? How are some thyroid glands, parathyroid, things like that? How's your brain working? It more looks on the physiology side versus just on what things look like, which is, X-ray, ultrasound, MRI. They focus on those pieces.
And so how would you describe then what radiology is? Because obviously you just mentioned X-ray and that there's kind of even some components of maybe what radiology is too.
Yeah, so like in radiology as a whole, like big picture, it's any imaging, that we can think of. So X-ray, ultrasound, MRI, CT, bone density, nuke med. So those are all, I think, the things that roll up into radiology. And then, within each subspecialty, most of them have different degrees. So I oversee the X-ray department as well as nuke med. So a lot of times X-ray is like our start. So that's our starting point. And then from there, you can go into CT or MR. Nuke med and ultrasound are kind of on their own. So as far as like, if you were interested in a career path like that, you'd specialize or you go to school for ultrasound specifically or nuke med.
Okay. So just to help young people with a few acronyms, the CT is a CAT scan?
CAT scan, correct.
Yep. And the MP?
MRI.
MRI. Okay. I heard. Okay. Yep. So an MRI is a
magnetic resonance. I always mess up that word. Resonance imaging. Yes.
That's okay.
Ultrasound is US ultrasound.
Yeah, ultrasound. So again, for young people, we're not going to spend a lot of time on defining this, but this is where I want to encourage you to do some of the research after today. If you're not sure what those are, it's definitely worth digging into the resources I'll share with you to get the definitions. So tell us, obviously you've progressed to be a manager now, and we'll focus on that, but I know the young people definitely want to hear a little more about what a typical day would be like in radiology for those right out of college jobs.
Sure.
And just to clarify, it's not a medical degree. One of the students was asking, it's not a medical school to become a radiology. Nope. It's a 4-year degree in most
places. So correct. I actually thought about going into medical school. I mean, initially people think like healthcare, it's like nurse or doctor. Like that's just the two options that most people think about. And I learned, just from a professor about nuke med, and I kind of asked around. I think one of the best things, that I encourage people to do is get an entry-level position just in healthcare to see what's out there. There's a lot of even people I interact with on my day-to-day basis that I wouldn't have thought that, I can go into healthcare and from this, angle, like, or have a job in this area, because we just didn't know about it. Nursing or doctor is like just kind of standard. From a day-to-day perspective, so a lot of the techs, you're working with patients every single day. So, we have outpatients and inpatients. So inpatients are staying, in the hospital, and outpatients are usually walking in. They're coming in for their study that day. We perform the X-ray or the CAT scan, and then they leave, and then they get their results from their doctor. So usually a combination. We're seeing both inpatients and outpatients throughout the same day, and depending on the day, it can get very busy. Yeah.
And so for young people that may not know this, because I didn't know this when I was young, but inpatient means you're a patient in the hospital. And then the outpatient means you're coming from home for your tests. So I just wanted to clarify.
And then the plan is for you to leave too. Like you won't come and stay. So if you're staying, then you get turned into an inpatient, but outpatients usually are walkie-talkies that come in and out every day.
Right. And so that's just important for young people. Part of this process of career chats is to start to evaluate who they are and what kind of relationships they want with patients. And so there's some situations like in long-term care where you get to know your patients, you become like family. And then obviously this type of specialty is very, like you say, you come in and out, and those are important. How does that fit your personality?
So I think it fits my personality well. Like it can be different every single day. So, depending on the patients, we have some, not like frequent flyers, but we'll have patients that will have a routine exams done every 6 months. So you may get to know a patient, which is nice. And then you just get to meet a lot of people, every day. When I was a tech, like every single day you're meeting different people, and it's nice to talk to them and just kind of like, have a relationship. Even if it's short term, you make sure the patient is your main focus while you're here, and you just want them to have a great experience. And that's one thing I always ask for my techs to make sure that they're doing is, hey, when that patient comes in, I want them to know that they're the only thing that matters, because truly at that point in time they are. They just want to give them the best care that they can.
Yeah, I think that's just really important, that customer service across we're hearing that's a big part of healthcare. So as young people are evaluating, if they're not really into customer service, then this may not be the right field for them.
Maybe not.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you encourage them to do an entry-level position to kind of see what's out there. What would be some of those entry-level, right out of high school positions they could maybe get to even start to observe what's behind the scenes at Mercy Health? I know
Yes.
probably environmental services or
Environmental services, food nutrition, some even some supply chain like stocking. There are some jobs like that. Transport. So we actually in Mercy Health St. Mary's as a whole, like our transport is just strictly to radiology, but I know there are some hospitals or healthcare organizations that they have central transport, so they transport patients for all over the hospital. And I oversee transport for radiology, and I love seeing students come in that don't maybe know what they want to do, and I've seen them kind of grow, and I always encourage them, hey, come go check this out, go look at this, because it just gives them the opportunity to see if healthcare is even for them, without investing time and resources. You don't want to, the worst thing I think could happen is you go through your schooling and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't know if I want to be in healthcare. Well, you just spent 4 years of your life trying to figure that out. I think you're learning it earlier on is definitely beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's such a great suggestion. I mean, I worked at McDonald's in high school and it was so great for customer service. For young people on the Zoom today, you have to, if you're going to work part-time anyway, why not do it in a hospital? Just for the reasons that Chris is outlining, because you get a lay of the land, you start to learn about different things. So I think that's such a great takeaway for today, for sure. Do you work with children too? I know we have some young people who are interested in working with kids.
Not a ton. I think mostly Helen DeVos kind of has like their niche market there. So we don't see a ton. I mean, occasionally you'll have a couple peds come through, but most of the time, if there's anything major, they're going to Helen DeVos.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know. So do you have to get additional training to work with children, or is that just part of the degree?
No, part of the degree, they'll cover that when you're in school. And if you wanted to specialize, I think you could, but I think for the most part, you just learn on the fly with the children.
Great. So as you take these images and you're collecting all this visual data on people, does it then go off to someone else to read it? Is that part of your training also to read it and give the feedback to the patient?
So no, that's a very good question. What separates us, so we perform the imaging for the radiologist. So the radiologist is a provider. They went to medical school 4 years and then did a residency for 4 or 5 years and possibly a fellowship, which is maybe another year or two. So radiologists have been in school a long time, 12 years is the minimum, and they're trained to do this. So that's one thing that we see often where patients will say, hey, well, what can you tell me about my, my study or my scan? The techs are very equipped to say, like, what, it's for the radiologist to interpret. I can't do that. You kind of have an idea from going to school what you're looking at, but it's not your responsibility to share, nor should you be sharing that information with the patient, because the radiologists, again, are trained and have plenty of education around those pieces. So they'll come up with a report, and then the report goes to whoever ordered the study. So usually it's your primary care provider will give you that they ordered it, so it'll go back to them, and then they'll use that for further evaluation or whatever the doctor is looking for.
So that's a really important boundary that you have to, even if you see something really bad, you have to be straight-faced and warm and friendly and not indicate that there's anything going on.
Yeah, and I mean, the radiologists do rely on us because there are things that the techs will see where it's like, hey, we need to call this like, it needs immediate attention. So we definitely the rads want us looking at it because we're their eyes before they may even see the study come through, and that's when we're like, hey, we need to hold the patient and then call the radiologist, and then there, is usually a quick intervention if need be. So that part's helpful, but again, keeping that straight face just to make sure the patient isn't alarmed because you don't want to scare the patient.
Yeah, I like some of the lingo, like the RADs. So that's what you call the doctors.
Rads, yeah.
I like that. And so tell us about the technology that you're using nowadays. Obviously, these machines are probably worth millions of dollars, I would assume. And is a lot of this happening electronically? Do you actually get to interact with the RADs?
Yep. So everything's electronic. So the equipment, X-ray equipment, we have portable units that you can take on the floor, and then our CAT scan machines, those are stationary. And what happens is there's maybe a little bit of annotation or, adjusting to make sure the images look pretty for the radiologist, and we send that to them electronically, and they just see it populate their screen. So they have a list that they're working through. They have their own hierarchy of what they read first. And then if there are questions, we can call our radiologists. We have some in-house. So if there are questions, they're really good about the techs going back and talking to them, that they just said, hey, is there anything additional you want us to image? Does this look okay? So that's nice. But yeah, all electronic, which is nice. It's not, I say old school, but like using the films and you putting up with light boxes. Yeah, that's not a thing really anymore.
Yeah, because I think there was also a safety issue, right? When you're dealing with x-rays, it affects people's health. So the newer technology keeps you safer. Are there any other risks for you in this field?
I don't think so. I think radiation exposure is probably the biggest thing. We have a medical physicist. Most of the techs, I don't myself because I'm not in the area very often, but where they wear a badge. So it actually, you get an idea on the radiation that you're getting, while you're here. So we have to monitor that. And there are limits that are set, from our governing bodies that will say like, hey, you can't be over this limit. But for the most part, the exposure is pretty low. One of the sayings is like ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable. And that's just like, what can you do to get the best imaging without, exposing the patient and yourself to the radiation?
Yeah, that seems really, really important. For young people, I picked up on a new job title I'd never heard of. So a medical physicist.
Yes.
Love that. I'm going to be researching that this afternoon. So thank you for sharing that. Sometimes young people, there's a little bit of anxiety, like, is it really hard? Am I gonna be able to figure this out? So tell us, is learning all this machinery and the different scans, is that hard, or is it broken into small pieces where you just start to accumulate that knowledge? Tell us about that part of your education.
Yeah, so I think for like nuke med, because that's what my background is, we learned to like by body systems, which I think was really helpful. So you break down, this is the, we're learning about lungs, and you learn everything, the scans, the isotope that you need. Then we switched at once, like we were felt comfortable with that, and we were tested on that, and we practiced at Ferris. They actually had a lab, so they had an older camera that you could use and for positioning and making sure the patients were in the right position. And we actually used students to test on, which was great. So we just break it down like per body part, and then I think you feel very comfortable once once you get the basics of it. I think you feel comfortable just going through the gastrointestinal, cardiopulmonary, the bones, musculoskeletal. So like they break it down that way. And it sounds like it's very similar for other departments. So ultrasound's kind of the same way, x-ray, you learn specific parts of the bodies, or you're taking the x-ray, CT, very similar. So they make it in manageable chunks. I know it can feel overwhelming. Absolutely. Like I recognize that. And I guess from an advice perspective, don't feel overwhelmed. If you work hard, you study, you put your time in, you'll definitely get it. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time for it to click. Like I remember as an intern, there was like an aha moment. Like I felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in over my head. And then, I helped a patient with he asked me a question. And I knew the answer, and I'm like, hey, I know that. And it wasn't something I could just like took out of a book. I just like remember like, oh, this is good. I know that. And like, that was like, I think I know what I'm doing, which is nice. And you have that confidence and just kind of builds on itself.
Yeah, I love that. That's such an encouragement to young people that you don't have to have it all figured out, that you will learn it, and with expertise, and that comes with experience, right?
Yep.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's great. I know that part of our discussion, we always love to hear kind of what the hardest part of your job is, and maybe the negative side, but also what's the most positive part of your job. Could you share those?
I think, okay, the best part of my job is like me as a manager, I love to see people grow. So that's one thing like I encourage the techs that I'm around. I try to see how they come to me, or as when I hired on, this is where they're at, and then what can they improve in. So like working on little pieces with that's meaningful to me, because I think I'm all about self-improvement. I think it's very important in taking ownership of your life and like this choices that you make, just trying to better yourself. So watching that happen, and I have techs that have grown, and techs that you're trying to groom possibly into maybe the next lead technologist, because you see qualities and skills. So I think that's part like, I don't know, from like that to me is very comforting. Also love when there's great patient success stories, so we have maybe a study we don't do very often. The patient's isn't a lot of pain, and we kind of figure out what the next steps are for the ordering provider to then make sure that patient's like on their way to some treatment. So those are two, I think, very positive things that, you go home at night, you're like, that was, it was a good day for that reason. Flip side, hard parts, or like things that cause stress to me. When equipment breaks, I want to pull my hair out. And, the other thing is staffing, so that, we have to like run a business, and we know we have a schedule full of patients. So if you get a phone call or 2 phone calls, like, hey, people called in, which it happens. It's like, now what do we do? So we actually had an instance once this week, once last week. Someone called in last week, and we kind of had to scramble to make that happen. And then camera broke last night at 4:30. So we were rescheduling, a bunch of patients, and again, using the customer service is key because we can't control it and they're anxious about wanting to have their study done. So just trying to deliver that in an appropriate message. So yeah, that definitely causes me to become gray. You probably can't see it now, but yeah, I am starting to see it.
I love it. Well, that's good for them to hear, the reality of that stress, because every young person has to start to realize that there's different types of jobs in healthcare. Some are more relaxed. When you think about a dentist office, right? It's kind of got a nice rhythm to it, versus other departments, maybe like yours, that it's just a little more fast paced and,
Yep.
and a little bit of that working under pressure. And so young people have to start to learn, like, which part do I like and do I want to do? You mentioned the lead tech. And so I want to just help clarify for the young people, the transitional of your career. So you graduate, you said you had internships. So I'd love for them to understand, like, how does that work? Did your school require that of you? How did you even find out about that internship? Help us understand that. And then I'd like to hear kind of how you progressed. And then you had mentioned earlier in our conversation that you actually went to some different hospitals and tried out some different things. So kind of give us a little bit of that insight.
Absolutely. So part of the requirement with Ferris, with graduating for both my nuclear medicine degree and my healthcare administration, was an internship. So I actually was an intern at Henry Ford on the east side of the state, a nuke med intern for 9 months. And they kind of helped us with that. So that was nice. It was a requirement from the program, but they said, these are our sites, pick in for where you want to go. Naturally, I wanted to go over there because I was from there. But that isn't always the case. So with my healthcare administration degree, they were just kind of like, figure it out. So I kind of used a network of people that I knew and asked around and landed somehow at St. Mary's. I actually interned under my boss now is the director, but she was a manager. And it was by happenstance. So I was looking on the internet. I knew someone that worked at not Grand Valley, GRCC. They said, hey, I know someone who will sometimes take students. She was kind of asking around. I landed this from an intern perspective. So I interned under Teresa, which I'll kind of talk about coming full circle. So I was an intern here in 2013, I believe. And then from there, I felt like I tried to make a good impression, and Teresa was like, hey, go get experience. I'm like, okay. So I worked at Spectrum Health for a little while in surgery. I was actually working in the PACU, which is post anesthesia care unit. So I was working with patients there. And then a position opened up at Borges and Kalamazoo for pharmacy supervisor. I didn't really have I didn't have any supervisor experience. Applied anyways, because I think it doesn't hurt just to apply. Got an interview, and then, went down there, interviewed, didn't know anything about pharmacy, didn't know really a ton about supervision, but luckily my degree, I think, helped me with that. And I had someone that my boss down there, Kim, she kind of took a chance on me, which I was very appreciative of. So I went from not having any supervisor experience, and now I was a supervisor for inpatient pharmacy techs, which pharmacy tech, also a great option if you're looking to get an intro into the healthcare field. So I did that and immediately went to having 25 to 30 employees that worked around the clock, because inpatient cares they never close. The hospital's always open. I worked there for a year and a half, and then got a call from Teresa, my boss now, and she was like, hey, I got the job as director. I'm looking to fill my position. And again, thankful enough to made a good impression on her. At this point in time, 2 or 3 years had gone by. We kind of stayed in contact, but it wasn't I wasn't reaching out to her all the time. Every couple, 6-7 months, I'd say, hey, how things? I'm just keeping in check. And she just was like, yep, interview and let's see. And nothing was a guarantee. But again, I made a good enough impression with her in the phone interview, and then was on a panel, was in a panel interview with everyone. And I was offered the position and haven't looked back since. So came back to St. Mary's, which I love it here. It's a wonderful culture and great organization to work with. So that, again, my career path is a little bit different because I didn't work as a tech for very long. I was a tech at Henry Ford for a little bit of time before I went back to school to finish up my internship here. Typically what happens is, you start off, you graduate, you get on call somewhere. So, you're working as needed, you get hopefully part-time or benefit position. And then from there, working into the lead tech role, which I mentioned earlier, which is, you don't have supervision responsibilities, but you're kind of just in charge of coordinating how the days go. How is the day going to go? Because I mentioned it can get crazy. So it's nice to have someone who's like, hey, they take kind of handle on this is how the day is going to go. And they're a middleman between me and the frontline colleagues. So yeah.
A couple of comments just came in, Chris, that like, this is really cool and this is super inspiring. So I just want you to know that you just being able to give students this information is so valuable to them. I did want to point out two things that I heard from that part of your conversation is the networking, that you stayed in contact with a previous boss, that you reached out to people who might know someone. And that's such an important skill, young people, that you make good impressions, that you stay connected, that you always leave on positive notes, because you never know how other people will help you get to the next position. So I just want to point out that that networking for you was so, so important. And that your degree offered some flexibility, that you necessarily didn't have all the experience to be that leader in pharmacy. You had never even been in pharmacy, but that college degree was transferable, that those qualities about being in healthcare administration got you that job. And so, because a lot of young people are worried about like, I have to have it all figured out. But again, hearing your story, there's movement in it. So yes, give them encouragement around not having to have it all figured out.
Yeah, I would definitely say like that's not a requirement, because I mean still no, I don't know if I know what I want to do when I grow up, and I say that because you just kind of, I know that I enjoyed the business part of it, which was nice to focus on that piece, but having the flexibility, and now even when I came to St. Mary's, it was like I worked in surgery, I worked in a different radiology department, and then worked in pharmacy. So you come back, it's not, my vision is more like broad scope, which is nice to have that, just that in general, because I just think it just gives you a fresh set of eyes, and you're not as narrow-minded or as narrow-focused, I guess, if you will, if you just had a specialty. And if you have a specialty and you know you want to do, that's great. I myself did not. So it was nice to be able to have the flexibility to kind of move around.
Yeah, and just another plug for getting those entry-level positions in a hospital. My daughter worked as a nutrition tech, so she was delivering trays to all sorts of departments. She really got a lay of the land. That helped her start to clarify. So again, for young people, please keep that in mind. We have just two minutes left. So
Okay.
I guess I want to give you a chance to share a word of wisdom.
Okay.
So be thinking about that. But I do want to share just another resource with young people that I had shared last week, some ways that they can do some more research. So young people, write this one down. This is called the myhot.org. This is a special website specifically to help you kind of narrow down which health career might be a good fit for you. So they have like a little assessment, a little test to help you ask questions, and then they'll give you some results of what kind of healthcare might be good for you. So myhot.org. And it also connects to Michigan data specifically. So it shows all the different colleges we have in Michigan and which health programs specifically they offer. So I recommend that. And then, as I said, we didn't focus a lot on like how much money do they make, and what a typical schedule is. Those are kind of things I want you to go to onetonline.org to figure out. And even as you look up radiology, one of the beautiful parts of ONET, it will give you similar occupations. So again, you can click on that and start to see the CAT scan, the x-ray, and start to read about all those different ones. So I love this resource. Chris has been very generous to give you his email. So if you were inspired about radiology, here his email. Mercy Health does not do job shadows, so I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I might mention that, so that's
no, I was going to ask about that, but I just thought I'd throw that out there right now. So again, entry-level positions are a great way to get that similar experience of getting in, and that's why I kind of had you focus on that, Chris, because that's a great way to get information that you would do for a job shadow. But we do have other partners in Grand Rapids that do offer job shadows once COVID's done.
Sure.
So I'll be sure to share some of those resources as we go through the series. So again, and then my name again is Krista Harmon, and I'm from the Career Readiness Department. So feel free to ask me any questions you need as well. So Chris, as we finish up, word of wisdom, these young people are exploring. What would you like them to know maybe from your journey that?
So I think the biggest thing you take away, just like to take ownership of like what you want to do. You are going to be the owner of that. And if you want to learn and try to figure things out, and like, it's okay to not know what you want to do, because I didn't. Sometimes I still don't know what I want to do, but just like having a plan and trying to execute that and really investing time. Like, I think you're responsible for yourself and your actions, and just saying like, you know what, this is what the steps I want to take. There are tons of resources out there. I know you shared those couple that you had, Krista, and my email and other just things on the internet. There's all kinds of information out there. So learn about it, be curious. use this time to try to figure out what you want to do, because you want to be happy in life and, have a job that you enjoy, waking up every day, going to work, and it doesn't feel like work. And that's how I feel.
And I totally agree with you. I would do my job even if I didn't get paid for it. I just love it. So I love, Chris, to hear you so passionate about your work. You've been awesome today, Chris. It's the young people have really enjoyed it too. I've learned a lot. I'm going to check out a new term that I learned. So thank you so much. And we wish you all the best. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. You too. Take care. Bye.